Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three martinis coming up.
Well, the good news is it's Friday. The bad news is we have all bad martinis today. So for perhaps the first time ever, we've had one day this week that was all good, one day that was all crazy. Now we close with all bad. The worst news, of course, is that was like 2 hours of speaking last night that you and I are never going to get back in our lives, Jim. And you had to double live blog it on top of everything else. So thanks, Biden.
Greg, I learned a lot last night. I learned that by 9 p.m., I really like to be on the couch, and I just don't, and I don't want to hear about politics, and I don't want to be typing, and I recognize my duties for both NR and Washington Post to live blog it, but and like, apparently people were tuning in and people were reading, but like, just let us live our lives after 5 or 6 p.m. Like this is, it just struck me as like, I never enjoy the State of the Union, and this was a particularly unenjoyable State of the Union. So thanks a lot, Biden.
Exactly. My kids begged me to stay up just because they wanted to see like the whole pageantry of it, the entrance and all that stuff. Little did I know at the time that a bunch of pro-Palestinian, perhaps pro-Hamas demonstrators were blocking the president's motorcade route, so he didn't actually show up till like 9:20. So when you have young kids, that doesn't exactly go well. And pushing 9:30 by the time he actually started the speech. So great job,
during
everybody. That
exact time period, Greg. It's apparently a big Three Martini amongst children. Got a lot of time to learn about the government system. I'm not making this up. My younger teenagers said they all look like they want to sell me insurance, and I was thinking like, why would my younger one associate like little geckos or something, or maybe Flo or something like that? But for some reason that came out of his mouth, and I was like, that's my child. Some things are genetic, apparently.
Nice. Yeah, I had it on C-SPAN, and I was impressed that they recognized the vice president, the speaker, and a smattering of Supreme Court justices. And so that made for a little bit of
This is the only happy moments we're getting out of last night, so might as well enjoy it.
Yeah, so there were a lot of jokes on Twitter that they were concocting the drug cocktail to get Biden to be more energetic last night. Well, I don't know if they needed to concoct anything, but he was energetic, excessively so, as some would say. I believe the word steroids ended up in the title of your Morning Jolt today, Jim. Yes. So, I mean, he came in fires blazing, accusing Republicans of holding a dagger to the throat of democracy, and of course then demanding unity, not only towards the end of the speech, but on every legislative priority that he's got. He was pugnacious and obnoxious at a number of times. No surprise for Joe Biden. He is an obnoxious person. This one particular kind of shades of Obama after Citizens United, talking about where he stands on abortion, being at least disingenuous, if not outright lying about Republicans pushing a national abortion ban, and then trying to talk smack to the U.S. Supreme Court.
It's a decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court majority wrote the following, and with all due respect, justices, women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that.
Yeah, well, their job is not to figure out the political consequences. Their job is to get the Constitution correct. So I don't know if he never actually quoted the decision or whether the women have political and electoral power is actually what he was quoting, and he just kind of mangled that. But he was angry. He was quick. He stumbled a lot. He did not trail off, as far as I could tell, but he was definitely out for a fight. And as many people said, from my own living room to every cable channel, with the possible exception of MSNBC, which fawns over everything, this was more of a convention speech than a State of the Union. And it showed. And if he was looking to rally the base, maybe it helped a little bit. But if he's looking to win the middle, I don't think it did much. Yeah,
the chance of 4 more years made this sound like accepting the nomination at the convention. I don't want anyone to misinterpret me. I thought the proposals and everything that was discussed in the speech, and we'll talk a bit about that in a second, it was all hot, flaming garbage. It was a terrible speech, and I recognize it was not aimed towards me. With that said, if you were a Democrat and you were walking into last night really depressed and you felt like Biden always came across as a guy who was half asleep and soft-spoken and all that stuff, he came, never mind the Red Bull, as I said, I want him to pee into a cup because I think it was more than espressos. But if you feel a lot better if you're a Democrat. I said that people in the campaign offices must be doing cartwheels down the hallway because this was as fired up as we may have seen Biden in his entire presidency. And I felt like it sounds like he had been listening to FDR and Truman, and he just went out there and I'm going to give them hell. I'm going to blast, Republicans. That's what a lot of Democrats want to hear. I also note this was very much was a campaign speech. It was not a State of the Union speech. And it was also very much not one aimed at soccer moms in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, or the potential swing voters or anything like that. This was to the Democratic base. A Democratic base that has grown less and less enthusiastic about Biden for the last 3 years. And I don't think one speech will change things dramatically. I think in a couple of days, nobody's going to remember much about the speech. But one of my friends and a smart person who works on the Hill said, look, up until very recently, it really felt like not just that Biden was tired and sleepwalking and no energy and no fire and no verb. The campaign felt that way. It was insisting the border was fine. It was insisting the economy was great. He did the same things last night, but at least he did it with vigor. At least there was a certain pep in this. Biden was fired up, and Biden looked like he really wanted to fight, and that is what a whole bunch of Democrats have wanted to see from him for a long time. Maybe he gets a short-lived burst in the numbers out of this. Traditionally, State of the Union addresses don't have big, lasting changes on this. But I would note that, I think at the end of the month, Trump's trial begins. Biden will give a convention speech. We don't know if he's going to participate in the debates in the fall. We may not see a lot more of Biden between now and Election Day. And so this may be the biggest serving of Biden we get. And I think Democrats are probably feeling terrific about it. I think they feel like, wow, he really rose to the occasion last night. Again, not in a way that's meant to help us. I think we also learned a lot about the Biden campaign strategy for last year. It's to emulate Obama in 2012. We will sacrifice a lead among the independents if we can maximize turnout in every blue corner of every swing state. And it worked for Obama in 2012. Biden's starting out with much worse numbers. He's in a much worse spot. But you can see their strategy and the idea that it could work. I also think that there are certain circumstances in which a Republican could run very well against this. Trump brings a lot of baggage to it, and I don't know if it's the slam dunk that Republicans would like it to be.
Yeah. The other thing that's going to be a repeat of 2012 is that the Democrats, particularly Biden, has a huge money advantage. And there was a story, I think, in Politico that they plan to absolutely bury Trump with ads, just like Obama did against Mitt Romney, while Romney was still playing out the string against Rick Santorum and getting a much later start on the general election, obviously, than Obama did with no real opposition, if he had any at all. Most people's opinions are locked in since both of these guys have been president. There's not a ton of votes to win over. It's really about turnout and maybe some gettable votes in the middle. But it's a different dynamic than in 2012. In terms of the issues, real quick, once again, Biden accusing Republicans of trying to gut Social Security and then insisting that he's not going to touch it, which shows you, once again, we had this at previous State of the Union addresses in his administration, where neither party is serious about dealing with entitlements. Nobody wants to touch it because they think it's the third rail, and maybe it is, but they're going to go belly up. Here's one clip that I just want to get to about Biden, deficits, and taxes real quick.
I've been delivering real results in fiscally responsible ways. We've already cut the federal deficit. Over $1 trillion. I signed the bipartisan deal to cut another $1 trillion in the next decade. It's my goal to cut the federal deficit another $3 trillion by making big corporations and very wealthy finally beginning to pay their fair share. I'm a capitalist. If you want to make or can make $1 million or millions of bucks, that's great. Just pay your fair share in taxes.
The copyright ended on Mickey Mouse after 100 years. Can we retire pay their fair share if it doesn't come with an explanation of what the fair share is? I mean,
playing all the greatest hits. Yes.
So, and the other thing is, and Obama did this too, because Obama could say that the year before he took office, they passed TARP, and that obviously added a ton of money onto the deficit. Same thing with COVID during the last year of Trump. So technically, yes, you have a smaller deficit than the last year of your predecessor. But compared to the last normal year of your predecessor, not even close. Inflation is a result of the policies. The interest rate hikes are a result of the policies. This guy pretending he's the fiscal disciplinarian is just a joke.
Yeah, I mean, once again, Biden says I've reduced the deficit and hopes that most Americans hear I reduced the debt. The deficit is what we have in 1 year. The debt is the overall. Even if you bring down the deficit, the debt is still getting bigger. As you pointed out, a huge look, COVID was not very far from the most ordinary circumstance you could get. We're now in a current state in which, look, people might complain about the economy, but the GDP is high, unemployment is low, and tax revenues are really, really high. We're still adding $1 trillion to the debt every 100 days. Right? We freaked out when it surpassed $1 trillion a year in the early Obama days. So we are now well beyond. There's 365 days in a year. You can do the math on that. You're on pace for a $3.6 trillion deficit in a year. These are crazy numbers. And this is not, again, if we were fighting a terrible war that was eating up a lot of resources like Iraq or Afghanistan, okay, you could say that's a factor. If they were going through a recession and people were unemployed and they weren't paying their income taxes and they weren't buying as much and they weren't, okay, maybe that's, a factor. We don't have those factors. We just have wild, crazy adequate. Hey, did anyone warn that the baby boomers were going to retire and that entitlements were going to go, spending was going to go up? If only we'd had some warning for like a generation.
Yeah,
I told you this is a bitter Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch.
Just let that sink in. $1 trillion in deficit every 100 days. And they're trying to tell you that they're on the fiscally conservative side. Absolutely insane. All right. Well, if you want a good deal, though, you need to go to 4patriots.com/martini. While you're there, you can check out the Patriot Power Generator 2000X, which right now comes with a free solar panel. Also, free shipping on orders over $97. You just want to be prepared when that power goes out. Just yesterday, Jim, our water heater bit the dust. You just never know when things are going to happen. You need to be ready. And the Patriot Power Generator 2000X now has double the capacity, and it's expandable so you can run the big appliances like your fridge, your freezer, medical devices even longer. 12 outlets, including 4 AC, to power more devices at once. Plus 2 USB-C outlets that can charge your phone 20 times faster than a regular plug. And don't forget about those last chance items, including on the Patriot Pure line, the UV phone sanitizer, the UV wand, the sanitation solution machine, and the disinfecting power bank. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to get your Patriot Power Generator 2000X with the free solar panel included. Plus, get free shipping on all orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, the president had a few things to say on the international front. In the beginning, very beginning of the speech, he even quoted Reagan about tearing down this wall, which I'm not sure Biden was a big fan of that speech back in 1987, but we'll leave that aside for now. He's now using it to channel support for more assistance to Ukraine. But it was towards the very end of the speech where he's talking about the Middle East, where we hit our second bad martini today. Biden talking about what the U.S. is going to do to increase the inflow of humanitarian supplies into Gaza and his warning for Israel. Oh, plus his long-term solution. Take a listen.
I've been working nonstop to establish an immediate ceasefire that would last for 6 weeks to get all the prisoners released, all the hostages released, to get the hostages home and ease the intolerable and humanitarian crisis and build toward an enduring, something more enduring. The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. To the leadership of Israel, I say this: humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. Protecting and saving innocent lives has to be a priority. As we look to the future, the only real solution to the situation is a two-state solution over time.
Yes, we must reward terrorist attacks with a two-state solution. So, Jim, he wants the Israelis to basically have twin top priorities, at least. Nothing can be more important than humanitarian relief for your enemy. Israel trying to reduce civilian casualties, but we know that Hamas uses them as human shields. And this pier, he says there's going to be no boots on the ground. I'm not sure exactly who's going to build this. I assume the pier will connect to Gaza. So somebody's got to build it. I mean, there's just so many different radical elements there. You have to be concerned about what could potentially happen while that construction's going on. So what'd you pull away from his Middle East talk last night?
Greg, the only way I support the construction of off Gaza a short pier is if everyone in Hamas takes a long walk off of it. in a speech that had all kinds of stuff I could not stand, this proposal was the one that really jumped out as it feels like we are completely reorienting the entire U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East to win enough votes in Dearborn, Michigan. Because this, no one's been clamoring for this. I remember early on in the conflict, there was talk about the idea of parking a medical ship off the coast of Gaza, flying out children to that. And they pointed out the extreme difficulty of putting U.S. helicopters landing on the ground to load on the patients and load off the patients and things like that. I suppose you could build a platform and all that kind of stuff offshore. At some point, it's got to get to the Gaza coast. And it's very hard to imagine how you do that without boots on the ground, unless they're doing some sort of Clintonian BS. Well, there's still water around their boots, so technically there's still boots in the sea, not boots on the ground. The moment I heard about this, I just started, you know I've been around for a while. Marine barracks in Lebanon in 1983, Mogadishu, 1993. I mean, if you just have U.S. forces in an area with a lot of hostile folks, and they're not in a ready, set up for combat type situation, they're going to get targeted by radical groups like that. It's almost certain. And right now, I know that the Hamas ability to fire rockets and their arsenals have been severely degraded. I don't think you can say that the threat has been eliminated. It just feels like the sort of almost a spitballing idea, just flailing. But I'm also very glad that, Greg, we're playing a lot of audio. As I said, Biden was fired up. He was angrier. He was loud. He was shouting. But I know it's like Biden doesn't enunciate the way he used to. And we've seen this guy as vice president. We've seen this guy in the Senate. We know what Biden's normal speaking is. And the words kind of run together. I don't know if this, I'm was somebody running the teleprompter too fast? I don't, whatever it was, Biden does not speak as clearly as he used to. A good for you, but it's still like, I think that adds to the perception of Biden being too old for the job. And I don't know if he can control that anymore. But anyway, so I think that was I don't see how this is also going to work. Somebody, a lot of people as soon as the very negative reaction, at least in my circles yesterday when I heard about this, and a lot of people saying this is a proposal that's never going to get off the ground. You're never going to see this. This is going to be logistically far too challenging. Someone with greater sense will reject this idea before it can come to fruition. And I hope that's the case. I don't know if that's the case. We'll see how things shake out. But this really gave the vibe of an administration that was just flailing, saying, "Dear Arab American and Muslim American voters in Michigan, please forgive us. We will come up with any idea we possibly can to help, to get you back." Exactly right. And it's also covering over the problem with the humanitarian aid. It's not that the humanitarian aid is not crossing into Gaza. They started to truck it in, and then Hamas confiscates the goods. The people don't get it, and because I guess they want pictures of emaciated children to go up on the wires so people think Israel's evil, they're the ones. Hamas is the ones keeping civilians away from the aid. We saw the footage that they tried to blame on Israel of the stampede trying to get to trucks just a few days ago. Sometimes they're actually attacking their own people as they try to get relief because they're trying to keep it from them. And then you and I nearly did a partial martini earlier this week of us parachuting supplies in. And there were people in the streets saying, "I don't want American stuff. This is just going in the garbage can." So they've been brainwashed. The leaders of Hamas don't want their people to actually get these supplies. It's a mess. And Biden is way oversimplifying the situation. I was going to say, if we're going to do this big favor we're going to say the Palestinians, once you've built that pier, it's not like Hamas can't use it to bring in arms or other things like that. Shouldn't we get some hostages out of this? Maybe let the hostages go first. Like this. My understanding is that they've, the UN report was like, yeah, probably sexual abuse of the hostages is continuing. How about you guys stop raping hostages and then we think about helping you? Only political desperation would spur a president to make proposals like this. Yeah, I agree, and I think he also has the impression that if all the hostages are released, that's the end of the military operation. No. All right, Jim, on to our third bad martini now. And for that, we focus on the Republicans. Obviously, the Democratic president was in the spotlight last night. You got to see the Republicans sitting quietly most of the time. I thought Speaker Mike Johnson, for his first State of the Union, with very subtle facial expressions, did a pretty good job of expressing his opinion on most of what Biden had to say. You predicted an outburst by Marjorie Taylor Greene. Points for you. That's exactly what happened. At the time he was talking... Not exactly Nostradamus.
Yeah, could have been predicted. She started to yell out, say her name when it came to the border issue, and she wanted him to mention Laken Riley. The Biden team was ready for this. They had a button next to the podium that he held up, and I guess condolences to USC football coach Lincoln Riley's family, because Biden did not get the name right.
Yeah.
And then in the Republican response, you had Katie Britt, the freshman senator from Alabama, very telegenic. They decided to go with a kitchen theme. I think you just do it with a flag behind you and just do it that way. The text of the response I thought was quite good. The delivery, a lot of people thought was overly emotive and swinging from too high to too low at various times. But the content was good. It's probably going to get overshadowed by the setting and by the delivery. But here's what she said, for example, about the border.
President Biden inherited the most secure border of all time. But minutes after taking office, he suspended all deportations, he halted construction of the border wall, and he announced a plan to give amnesty to millions. We know that President Biden didn't just create this border crisis. He invited it with 94 executive actions in his first 100 days.
Yeah, a lot of good content there. Same thing on what Biden has done damage-wise to the economy. But as I learned in speech class in college, Jim, 93% of what people take away from your talk, allegedly, famous survey, has nothing to do with what you're saying. It's what you look like and how you sound. And so it's the 7%, I'm sure this encourages you as you give speeches in various places, is what people take away from it. And the setting, okay. The delivery, I think, is going to be the most distracting part. Good content, but in the end, probably not what Republicans needed.
93%, you say, Greg?
Allegedly, yeah.
Crap. I'll begin with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Very predictable. This is kind of what she did last time, dressing up like Cruella de Vil. This is not my taste. I don't think this is good for the Republican brand or identity as a whole. I would love to have she said, when Mike Johnson called for decorum, and I think Johnson was great. And boy, I'm the last person who can give anybody grief for the not so subtle eye rolls. I've had a couple infamous ones on cable news. Mr. Speaker, I've been there. I think he actually did about his, he led by example. Marjorie Taylor Greene, when she was told said decorum is dead. Well, it's only dead if we decide that it's dead, or if she continues to kill it. At one point, it seemed like that she would be giving the Republican response to the State of the Union, not Katie Britt, and that she was going to give it during the State of the Union, yelling back during Biden's speech. And no, you see this in debates. You see this crosstalk. People can't hear it. They can't hear what's going on. Nobody wins. Nobody makes any points. Nobody gets to hear anything. So I would not call for that. I suppose, quite literally, on the issue of say her name, you have to give Biden half credit, because he said half the name, or at least got half of it right. I don't begrudge, the stance on the issue or the demand, or like that. That's all fine. But I think that, Marjorie Taylor Greene made it all about herself and doesn't care how this affects the rest of the party. It's probably good for her fundraising. It's probably good for her social media engagement, but I don't think it does Republicans that much good. I've heard people, I think Katie Britt's response was fine. You and I have talked about in the past, there's an old gypsy curse on this job. It never turns out well for anybody, particularly for Republicans. By the way, I was on Meet the Press Now on NBC yesterday, Greg, and I stole your joke. Marco Rubio recommends you stay hydrated, and it killed. So one, thank you, and two, I'm giving you credit here. Bobby Jindal, going back years, the president is always giving his speech on the biggest stage imaginable. And the moment the president pauses, his party leaps out of their seats and applauds, and it's just about the best, environment. The response is always given talking directly into a camera, usually alone, and it just doesn't. There's no pausing for applause. There's no atmospherics, right? There's none of that to enhance what the response is giving. I heard people complaining about Britt. I think she was fine. To me, the biggest problem was that because it's supposed to start at 9. Biden's motorcade avoids protesters over Palestine, so he gets to Capitol Hill late. He gets to starts 20 minutes late, gets into the chamber, spends 10 minutes shaking hands and doing the selfies and all that stuff. So I don't think he began until 9:30. It's an hour and 8 minutes or so was the time of the speech. So he's finishing around 10:38. I believe Brit began either right before or right around 11 o'clock in the evening, right?
Yeah.
Evening news is starting on the networks. It's not like you're going to, the cable news networks covered it in that and again, this is East Coast bias. I'm sure our West Coast listeners will say, it's starting fine. At some point, you're just so late in the night that nobody's going to watch it, or the audience is going to be significantly smaller. Yes, there will be clips of it that will play the next day and all that stuff, but the entire process of delaying it, it worked out well for Biden because I don't think there'd be nearly as much discussion of this. And if Brit was speaking too emotionally, I heard people saying, "Oh, it looked like she was giving an Oscar speech or something like that." Like, okay, I get that, but these are emotional topics. I don't think this is something where you can talk about it like Spock. And so again, high degree of difficulty. I don't think she was that bad. But I think most people's perception of the Republican response are going to be shaped a lot more by Marjorie Taylor Greene screaming during the speech than what Brit said 20 minutes or so after the speech.
Yeah. No, I think Brit did a good job content-wise. I thought her story of the abuse that migrants suffer, because the Democrats always want to say, oh, no person is illegal, and all this stuff that should be basically waved in. The horrors that she talked about that 12-year-old girl suffering are just absolutely horrifying. And that happens on a regular basis. Just to kind of sum up Biden, probably should have put this in the first martini, but no friend of Donald Trump, Meghan McArdle, a Washington Post columnist who has announced publicly she's voting for Biden. She says that Biden did about as well as I expected, but other folks seem to think it was wildly thrilling that he managed to deliver a speech all the way through while standing upright, which implies that they were worried he couldn't, which itself tells you something. So,
yeah, accurate. And what worries me is that, as I said, most of the time, the State of the Union speech, within a couple of days, people forget about it and you don't see it lasting. Because Biden does these events so rarely, that this will stay in the public's mind longer because it's not going to be replaced by some other one. Good by Biden's, or at least energetic by Biden's standards. Go look at what he was doing when he was talking about the credit card fees earlier in the week. He's shuffling and he's going there and he's just kind of mumbling and reading off the telephone. It was, we know what we're used to getting with Biden. And what we got last night was louder than usual, more fired up than usual, and perhaps on cocaine or something. No, by the way, I did the joke about steroids, and somebody was really, really upset saying that I was claiming the president was taking steroids. I do not think President Biden was in roid rage last night for, some fact checker is going to go after me on that. So,
can we revive sense of humor manufacturing in this country? I feel like for the last 10
Actually, if you want to fact check me, we're going to need a urine sample from the president. So let's,
That's exactly right.
That's your closing thought to wrap up the week, America. Trump, Biden, and urine. That's,
Wouldn't expect it any other way. Jim, you're actually going to be gone now for a bit of a stretch, a little bit for work, a little bit for family time. So enjoy that time, and we will see you actually in 3 weeks. So 3 Martini Lunch will carry on, though, with a lineup of excellent guest hosts, but we expect you tan, rested, and ready in 3 weeks.
Listeners can sense the ominous music in the background. Yes, I will be out. I look forward to returning, Greg, and I will see you in about 3 weeks.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Columbus of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific weekend and join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.